All right, guys, so we are going to make our drawings more dynamic since we've learned about variables and we now have the opportunity to start refactoring some of our code. We want to do this to be able to build up into starting to create objects and to be able to have more dynamic designs and stuff that we can do for future things. All right, so for this, really what we got right now is a very static picture. Now we have been using variables to build this, but we want to make this more dynamic. Okay, so to start this off, let's go ahead and duplicate our alien. And then we are just going to call this refactored dynamic alien. All right. Now, this is the topics that we are going to be doing. We want to make the colors dynamic. So there's a couple things that we could do when we're looking at this alien. We want to be able to change the eyes, the nose, the mouth. Now that's kind of like the facial feature colors. We want to be able to change that skin tone. And we want to be able to change the background. So let's start with the first one. We have been talking about the random function for a while now. Let's look at how we can kind of set that up in terms of color. Random we have already used for doing arrays to be able to do things like the magic 8-ball and the random name generator, but we can also use it for values. So if we don't put anything, we're going to get values between 0 and 1. If we put one value, it's going to give us a random number from 0 up to, but not including the number, and then I can give it two values. It will return a random number from the first one, including the first one, but not including the second one. So let's kind of look down at the syntax, see what that means. Okay, so random it gives us a value in a range. Now, the min value, that would be the lower bound, is inclusive. It means that it will include that value. Now, for the upper bound, the max, it is exclusive, so it will not include that value. So if I am trying to do a random value between 0 and 100, it will give me random numbers from 0 all the way up to 99 or 99.99. But it will not give me a random value of 100 because it is excluding that value. Okay, so we want to go ahead, we want to apply this to the skin tone. So let's look at what variable we use for doing the skin tone. Okay, of the variables that we have, alien image, alien base color, alien face color, and easy C. We set them up here. So I'm looking at the drawing the head function. That's what I want to see. So instead of me having to scroll really hard, I can just minimize any function. So this would be the background of the face, and then there it is. That's the head. So that would be the skin tone right here. So if we could change this dynamically, we would be able to have a little bit more dynamic look. So then let's look at a color picker. Now, the colors we have been learning, they go from 0 to 255. They're made of 3 channels, the red channel, green channel, blue channel. Okay, so we are looking for the random values that are going from 0 to 255. Okay, so then when I'm in here, I could change here, just change where that fill is, but since I already have it up here, I can change my values up in my setup, and then I don't have to go through all my code. And that's kind of why we designed it like that. So in here, instead of us just giving a gray color, we want to start using the random function. So we're going to do random, and if I go up to 255, that's going to go from 0 to 255, but not include 255. So that means I'm going to have to go up to 256. Okay. Now, if I run this now, it's going to be in shades of gray. So each time I run this, see, we can get dark, we can get light. We could go all the way from 0 to all the way to white. So let's randomize this. This is just for, if I only have one, it's just the gray channel. So I'm going to do this again, random to 256 and random to 256. There we go. Now we have some cool variation. Each time we hit play, we get a different color for the alien skin. So that kind of checks off that. We have used random to give variation for the alien's face color. Now let's do color picker. So we played around with the DOM objects already. Let's go ahead and look at them. Going into the reference. We've used the create input. We use the create button. We have not done a color picker, so this would be a good time to do this one. Color picker is a DOM object, so it's going to have that dot position. It's going to have the, I could actually track the mouse press and all that stuff if I wanted to. Now for this though, most of the time we want it to be kind of dynamic. When I change the color, I want to see that I'm changing the color. Okay, and it's immediately changing it on my canvas or what I want to apply it to. Okay, now a color picker has that dot value, but the dot value actually gives us a hex code, which isn't really what we want. We want that dot color value. Okay, and when we use that dot color function, it will return a color object, the same as what we've been using when we use a color object. Okay, now since we're doing this in the draw, let's look at the syntax. We can call create color picker, and then we have an optional value here, which is the default color of an element. Okay, now if we're going to do this in the draw so that we can see it dynamically change all the time, and we do it, say, for the background, it needs to have a value the very first time it runs, otherwise it's going to error. So let's go ahead and create this, and I'm going to do this with the error so we can see it. So we'll call it picker. So I'm going to go into my setup and I'm going to do a value for this. So picker is a create color picker. There we go. And I'm going to give it nothing for that optional. Now if I run this, there it is. It's right there. Okay. But I want to actually position this. I'm going to position it in the top left. So I'm going to do picker.position. And we're going to do 0, 0. Rerun our code. There it is. Now it's in the top spot. And it doesn't have a value as a default. Now if I go in here to my background and I change this to pull that picker.color like what we've seen, and I run, my code goes away. If I open up my console, I'm going to see that line 27, that's this right here, says undefined is an invalid color mode. It didn't have a value for color when I first started because the very first time it was run, I wasn't able to pick a color. It was already running before I did it. So I have to give it a default color. Okay, now if we go here and look, we can see that we could pass it using a set of quotes, RGB values, or we could pass hex codes. But we can also do it using our normal color and then pass in the RGB values like what we've been used to. So let's go ahead and do that. We're just going to pass in a color value, and let's say that I'm just going to make it like 220. Okay, so now that error goes away, and we could go ahead and see if this dynamically changes. That's pretty cool. We got a dynamic colored background that we can change it to whatever we want based off of matching with, say, the alien. So I could look for a cool color. And then I could give it a cool background. There we go. We're already getting dynamic. Okay, so that was just using a DOM object. That gives us, options. Okay, now let's look at being able to do all the facial features, the eyes, the nose, the mouth. We built that using the alien face color. Okay, so this right here, if I put 200 in there and reran it, it turns it all white. So that's where we are on building that. Now I want this to dynamically change. So I can actually keep this the same in setup, but I want in my draw, I don't need it for doing the head because it doesn't affect the head. But when I say I'm moving the mouse around on my screen, I want that to map to the color, the alien face color variable. Okay, so let's look at the map function. Map function. Map function is a function that helps us remap a number from one range to the other, okay, to any range that we want. So this is really useful if we're trying to maybe map small movements to the full size of the screen. I wanted to push a button, or I wanted to move my mouse a small amount, but I want it to translate to a much larger amount on something. Or maybe I want to do the opposite. I want to move across my screen the entire width, and I want something on my screen to only move a little bit based off that mouse movement. So I could do this to remap from one range to the other. Maybe I want to map from my mouse moving to a color channel, which we know only goes from 0 to 255. So we can see some examples of what they're doing. Like we have this bottom circle is going, our normal range of the width. But when we see the top, it looks like it's not moving that total range. It's moving a smaller amount, so I have to do bigger movements to make it work. Okay. Now, really, it requires 5 pieces. We could put a 6th piece to make it easier. We have to have a value, okay, that is going to be a value that we're checking. Okay, so that should be a dynamic value, like mouse X, mouse Y. Okay, and then we have the next pieces would be the lower and the upper bounds of the range that this value would be in. So if I'm looking at, say, the mouse X has a range from 0, which would be the smallest value, to the width, which would be the largest value. Okay, and then I can say what I want it to map to. That's the next one. This would be my new range. So I want to take this value and I want it to say, well, hey, it can have any value from 0 to 400, but really I want it to say that it has any value from 0 to 255. Okay, so that when I'm at the 400, I'm at the very end of my canvas, or the width of my canvas, that it will say 255 in the new range. Okay, so that's what the mapping does. So we're going to take this, we're going to build this in. Now, the last thing that it has a width and bounds. Now, this is saying Boolean, meaning that it just needs a true or false. This is an optional. I can constrain this new value that it's going to pop out of this function to the newly mapped range to make it so that it has to be within one of those. So it will, if I'm moving larger than those values, it will just max out at one of those values and not be able to go past it. So that's useful. Okay, now since this is dynamic and it's not a variable that I need to hold on to, really all I'm doing is just trying to rewrite this. I'm going to use some local variables. So I'm going to call 3 variables. They're going to be local. They only need to exist inside of the draw. Okay, so I'm going to call let and let's do R for the R channel, green for the G for the green channel, and B for the blue channel. Okay, now all of these I need to set a value for them. So I'm going to say R is, and I'm going to use that map function. So map, and this one let's do mouse X. Mouse X is a value. Like what I said, we want to go from, say, 0 to the width. Notice I'm not writing in a hard value in there. 0 to the width, and I want to map that from 0 to 255. Okay, and I'm going to say that, you know what, I do want to constrain that to only values that are between 0 and 255. Now, this, once I have it, is doing nothing. I could quickly console log this so we can see it work. All right, so if we look at our console, as I'm moving my mouse, now this is giving me values with decimals. We get all the way to 255. I can keep moving over, but it's not going to get larger than 255. And I can go to the left, and it won't get smaller than 0. Okay. So that is kind of what we want. Now we just need to actually start putting that in a color. So here, instead of me mapping this value, I've captured it. I want to do alien face color is going to be, the new one is going to be based off that color, and R is definitely going to be in there. Ugh. The autocorrect is a little annoying sometimes. Okay. So now just having just that R, I get variations of just grayscale, okay, which I don't want. I need to get the green and the blue in there. Okay, so I have to build for that. So I'm going to just take this and I'm going to copy and paste it for green and for blue. So there's green, and there's for blue. Now, if I'm just using those, it's all variations. These are all mapping the exact same value, which means I'm still going to get just grayscale because all these values are going to be exactly the same. Now, if I want to have variation, there's a couple things that I can do. I could say, I could take the value that I'm looking at could be something different, like mouse Y. And then I'm not going from 0 to width, I'm going from 0 to height. That already gives me some variation. Now I'm getting different colors when I move up and down and left and right. Okay, now because I need red, green, and blue, I could still use this where I'm looking from mouse X, but I could also change the order of the range. So I could say, you know what, I want to map this actually opposite. I want to map from, say, 0 to width, but I want it to go from, instead of 0 to 255, I want to go from 255 to 0. Or I want to map from this, going from 0 to width to 0, and switch one of these, and then it will make it reversed. Okay, so if we do 255, 0, and I rerun this, now when I'm far over on the left, I have my value of blue is going to be the largest value that I can have with my X. But now I'm at 0 for the red because I'm all the way on the left. That's how we mapped it. Green, the higher up that I'm going to have is going to, so my top left corner is going to be solid blue. As I make my way over, in terms of my X, that is decreasing the blue, and we're going to get more and more red. So there's red, okay? Now green is based off of height, so as I move down, I'm going to be adding green. So red and green make yellow. So I can start having more variations of colors, all right? So now we can play around with, let's have a green background, maybe a brighter green background. We have different cool alien looks that we could take. So now we're at this point like, hey, we got this. We have these local variables. We're remapping the red, green, and blue channels. We're re-putting those in as a color and saving it as the alien face color, and that's what's getting used when we're drawing the face. This is happening dynamically, so that's why we see it changing dynamically. Now, I actually want to save this. So that would be the last thing. We want to create some event when I press a key that it will save the canvas, okay? So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to minimize all of my functions so I can see them all closed to create another one. Now let's go to the events and we can look at those. Okay, we've been playing around with the mouse. I want to do something with the keyboard. So let's look at key press. Here's a function. Key press is a function that's called anytime a key is pressed, it's going to store the key that was pressed as a key code variable, okay? But then we also have other special key codes for special characters. So we could use that for a lot of games. If we're pressing the left arrow, then we want to move our player left. If we press the right arrow, we want to move our player right. We haven't learned conditionals yet. But really, I just want to save the canvas whenever any key is pressed. Okay, so let's kind of look at what that gives us. Let's look at the syntax. Key pressed, and then we have an optional event. So this could be a callback event argument. So we could put something in there. We don't need to because it's optional. So here is where if they're looking for specific key codes. So if I press the left arrow, if that matches, that is going to be white. Otherwise, it's going to be black. Let's see here. We have if a key is pressed, if the value was 0, then it's going to become 255. Otherwise, it's going to be 0. So we could get it any key that I'm pressing. It's just going to make it flip to the other color. So that could maybe be used for like tiles, to flip tiles over, something like that, for memory games, or for turning lights on and off. It makes it like a switch. So let's play around with that. We're using function key pressed. So I'm going to be down at the bottom. Function key pressed. Now saving an image, this is something that you definitely don't want to have inside the draw because we don't want this to happen 60 times a second. I don't need to save a file 60 times a second. Okay, I definitely want it to be something that is event-based. It only happens when I do something specific. Okay, now let's look in here in the reference. And let's say I don't remember what the code is. Okay, I want to save something. So I'm going to actually look here, look at the piece of code that it's trying to give me, see if it's called a method, and then see what type this is in, or what type of library part it is in. Okay, because I could, look up literally anything, and it may not have anything to do with what I'm trying to do. That should narrow it down. So save, I see this, save. This looks promising. It says method in P5 image. That's going to be something we're going to want to look at. This saves the image to a file, saves the image to a file, and forces the browser to download it. Now, we're not actually designing this alien. We used an image to draw the alien, but now we're not using the image anymore. So I don't think that this one is the one we want. Let's see what else they have. Save. Look at now saying method in P5. Let's see what that is. Saves a given element, image, text, JSON, CSV, WAV, or HTML to the client's computer. The first parameter can be a pointer to an element we want to save. The element can be one of a P5 element, which we've seen those are DOM things, an array of strings, an array of JSON. Okay, so there's lots of stuff that we could use for this. Second parameter is a file name. Third parameter is for options. Note that this is not recommended to call this method within draw, as it will open a new save dialog on every render. Okay, so we got to be careful on that. So we could use save. See, saves the canvas as an image by default. I think that that is what we want. We want to be able to save the canvas. So let's look. Make sure. I'm going to go down to the syntax, see if there's anything else that I can see. Object or file name, and options. All right. It says, if file name is provided, we'll save canvas as an image with either PNG or JPEG extension, depending on the file name. If object is provided, we'll save depending on the object. The object is provided as the first parameter. The second parameter indicates the file name. JSON. So this could technically work. And we see some where they're saving not just an image, but they're saving the canvas. This says saves the canvas as an image. So we see that they saved, but they're actually pointing to this, to a canvas, to this as an object. Here they're doing the same thing, but they're just giving it a file name. So we could play around with that. Now I believe there's also one more. So I'm going to do save. And I see save canvas. Let's look at that one. Okay, saves the current canvas as an image. The browser will either save the file immediately or prompt the user. So this one looks like it also will work. Save canvas. Look, here's our all valid ways that we could do this. Let's look at the syntax. We could give it a canvas, but since we only ever really create with one canvas, I don't know if we need that. File name and extension. File name we could give it, and we could give an optional file type. Okay, so save or save canvas look like it will work. So inside of this key pressed, I need to just put save. So let's do save, and then let's do, I don't know, my alien.jpg. Now I'm doing it as a JPG because I don't have anything that's in transparency, so I don't need to have it as a PNG. Now let's see how that works. I have my alien, and I want a different color. That looks cool. Let's change the color to be a good contrast. And then we can change our eyes. So I'm clicking on the mouse, is not doing anything. But this is key press. So let's say that looks pretty cool. I'm going to press any key. It pops up and it has that default my alien. I could click save. Let's go ahead and check that file. Oop, it told me my alien.jpg. It saved that. All right. Now let's see if we did it the other way. So save canvas. And instead of this giving us, we gave it two things. So let's see that. The save canvas, we gave it a file name and then a file type. So we could do it like that. So instead, maybe I call it dynamic alien is the name, and then I want it to be a JPEG. So now we do it here again. We get what we want it to be saved as. Let's give it a cool background. I'm going to press any key. Pops up with a save dialog. Dynamic alien. Click the save button. And now I've saved it as a JPEG. Okay, so that is two ways that we could save the canvas. Let's go ahead and look at either one of them. There it is. That was the image that we saved. Let's check the other one. We have two different images that we created, all by making our code dynamic. We didn't have to change all kinds of variables. We just made it dynamic. All right. So to quickly review, what did we do? We used the random function to give us values from 0 to 255. We did that to color the alien's skin, and we did that by just changing the red, green, and blue, picking random values for that. All right, now we wanted to make the background dynamic. We needed to do that by creating a color picker. We created that in the setup, but then in the draw is where we had to call the dot color function of it to be able to dynamically color the background, okay, by clicking on the color picker. Then finally we dynamically changed the colors of the facial features by mapping those values from the mouse positions to the range that we would draw in the color channels to get more dynamics on the colors changing for the facial features when I move the mouse. And then the last thing that we did was to make a event-based function like a key press, so that anytime a key was pressed, it will bring up that save dialog and save the canvas based off of the name and the file type that we're giving, or if we were just doing just a plain save, that we were doing the full file name with the extension. All right, so that is the walkthrough. You will want to make sure that you fully understand each one of these pieces, because you are going to end up having to implement these type of things in future projects to make sure that your code is dynamic and it's not just super static. All right, good luck. Have fun.